if you're eating your brekkie right now, we're about to talk about public toilets. You might not get the greatest image pop in your mind when you think of them, but also I bet you're thankful if you really need to go that you come across one. These facilities are also very important for people with disabilities or other conditions that might rely on them daily. The state government's been running an inquiry into the public toilets, looking into whether there are enough of them and how good they are. The inquiry came back with 22 recommendations. The New South Wales government has rejected 20 of them. Greens MLC Dr. Amanda Cohn, who chaired the inquiry, joins me now. Morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
So what were the recommendations from this inquiry and why were so many rejected?
So the committee heard that public toilets across the whole state are really inadequate and that there really isn't a functional regulatory framework to even use to be able to meaningfully improve the way that toilets are planned, designed, funded and maintained. So we really recommended a sweeping overhaul of that regulatory system so that state governments would actually be supporting local councils through a statewide strategy, through a local strategy to bring public toilets up to best practice. And we heard a huge amount of evidence. We heard from 60 witnesses across 5 days of hearings, including academics, builders, councils and representatives of a broad range of diverse community groups to really get into the detail of what best practice design and maintenance, etc. would look like. So, it's so disappointing to see the government instead of acting on that. And I should say it was a tripartisan report as well. We had members of the Labor and Liberal Party on the committee who also supported it. The government's just backed in the status quo of really poorly regulated and inadequate public toilets.
So is the government's is their response based on we don't want to start taking charge of this, it's kind of dealt with by councils and it should remain in council's hands? Is that the kind of impetus of their response?
Yeah, you certainly could interpret it that way. But the issue that we heard from councils is that they're not really funded or supported to do this work. I should say some councils do this really well. We heard, for example, from the City of Sydney Council, who voluntarily have done a public toilet strategy. So they're looking at public toilet provision in a strategic way. But they're under no obligation to do that, nor do they get any support to do that from the state government.
So what was the main problem with public toilets? We've all gone to ones that are pretty messy at times. Some I've been meaning to are quite clean. Was it that? Was it just the kind of cleanliness? Was it accessibility? What are the main problems you found?
Yeah. So the biggest issue you've ever faced in accessing a public toilet is that it's inconvenient or a bit gross. You're very lucky. For a whole range of people, whether they've got disability or chronic medical conditions, parents with young kids who need to come in with a pram, people who are breastfeeding, trans and gender diverse people, whether or not there's an appropriate accessible public toilet for them can actually make or break whether people will participate fully in community life, whether people can go to public events or spaces or attend employment or education. So what we heard is that this is actually a critical accessibility issue and something that really needs to be acted on.
Okay, so what is the ideal design then of a public toilet? What are you wanting to? Is it individual stalls? So you can have different genders in different ones, or what is the different approach? What's the ideal approach?
Yeah, that's right. So we talked about universal design standards, which means that toilets are designed for everybody by default. And we heard that modern best practice is really those individual cubicles where you get full privacy and internal amenities to gradually replace what you might think of as a traditional multi-stall facility where you've got kind of a creepy shared public space, but that's around a corridor or invisible, and then cubicles only separated by half height doors. So fully enclosed individual cubicles are much better for people's privacy, but then can far better be designed for people's accessibility needs too. So whether that's around mobility, whether that's around hidden disabilities or neurodiversity, they can then be used by parents and young children together, or someone with a disability and their carer together as well.
So was the state government, I guess, fearful of having been given the responsibility of having to replace all the public toilets? I imagine when we build new ones, we do it this way, but there'd be a lot of public toilets to replace if we went down this avenue, wouldn't there?
Look, there would be. I mean, toilets need replacing over time anyway, and we were certainly recommending a practical approach with that. We didn't say, you must rebuild every toilet in the state overnight. We understand that's not realistic. But taking a strategic approach where at a local and a state level, you actually map out what's available, how far apart they are, what the opening hours are, what the access is like, who lives in that community, who works in that community, who needs access. To then take a strategic approach to phase in that new design as toilets are built or refurbished. It's really disappointing to see the state government not take that opportunity to get it right. And, there's examples of good local councils who've taken that on voluntarily already.
Well, what did your inquiry find when it comes down to opening hours? Because it's interesting that I know there are public toilets near me that close at kind of sunset or so, only open when the sun is up. And I always think about it from the perspective of homeless people or otherwise, this is their kind of bathroom, essentially. What was your ideal when it came to opening hours?
This is a great question. So we've heard a really wide variety of reasons why toilets get closed at some hours. And in some cases, it can be because of things like vandalism. In some cases, it's just concerns about vandalism when that hasn't actually happened. And in other cases, it's, for example, staffing issues. We heard that some train stations at particular hours of the night aren't staffed anymore, and so they'll lock the toilets. That has a huge impact on some people. You've mentioned people experiencing homelessness. We had witnesses to our inquiry who were people experiencing homelessness, and that can actually be really discriminatory. It's really important that the opening hours be considered very genuinely. Having a default policy of just locking things up in case they might get vandalised, is having a profound impact on people. And there are many other ways to avoid that problem through other aspects of design.
Yeah, it also, I guess, leads to a different form of vandalism. If you close all the toilets on a Friday and Saturday night, the public toilets, you end up with people just urinating on the streets as well. So it's kind of, it leads to another problem as well. So what were the two recommendations that were actually accepted by the government?
They accepted one recommendation, which was around just an education campaign, so talking about the importance of universal design and disability toilets being used by people who need them, including hidden disabilities. And they also accepted one recommendation that was around actual discrimination against people experiencing homelessness. So they did agree that people shouldn't be discriminated against, but then they didn't accept any of our swathe of other recommendations that would have made a real difference to people experiencing homelessness. So, for example, that individual cubicle design where people might take bags or other belongings in with them, the need for better lighting and visibility, hooks, places to put things down. People with homelessness said in some locations they'd like showers, etc. So they accepted this one recommendation, which was specifically around actual discrimination.
All right. Well, thanks for speaking to us this morning. It was a very interesting conversation. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. And having done this inquiry, I'm thinking about public toilets more than I ever have before, and I think I always will.
Yeah, never going to get out of your head. Thank you, Greens MLC Dr. Amanda Cohn there, who chaired the inquiry into public toilets.